Okay, so today we're looking at writing an equation for each graph. So we're given a graph, looks exponential, right? It looks like a graph. I'm going to be looking at questions 15 through 18. It looks exponential because it looks like a curve, and I have to write the equation. Okay, so what does the equation look like? We talked about this last week. It looks something like y equals, and then I'm going to call this a times b to the x. A and b are going to be numbers. A is my initial value. We talk about initial value, remember? And B is my multiplier. If my B is more than 1, the graph is going up. If my B is less than 1, then my graph is going down. So just a quick look over here. 15 and 16, my multiplier is more than 1. 17 and 18, my multiplier is less than 1. They're still going to be positive, all of them, but it's going to be less than 1. So I'm expecting that fraction for 17 and 18. Okay, so let's take a look. How am I going to do this? I'm going to look for points on the graph. Any point that I can figure out, any point that I can see the values of. I can see this point, this other point, this other point, right? I can see the coordinates of these points real quick. So let me create a table of the values that I see. So I'm going to look at the points that I can see. -1, 1. That's one value, one point that I see. 0, 2, 1, 4, 2, 8, and then 3, 16. I'm just looking at the coordinates of the points that I was able to find. And this is going to be enough for me to write my equation. I'm looking at my equation. It's going to go into like y equals. The first value that I have to find is my initial value. What's the y value when x is equal to 0? What's the y value when x is equal to 0? So I'm really looking at this point right here. What's the y value when x equals 0? So 2. That's going to be my initial value. So 2 times. Now, what's my multiplier? The good thing is that I noticed that on my x values on the left, I'm increasing by 1. So that's what I want. Now, what's happening here at the bottom on the right side? For 2 to become 4, multiplication, what did I do? I multiply by 2, right? For 4 to become 8, I multiply by 2. For 8 to become 16, I multiply by 2. That's my multiplier. Now, what if I wanted to go up? Instead of multiplying by 2, I divide by 2. Remember, I have to do the opposite operation. But my multiplier is what do I do going down on my table? So I multiply by 2. My multiplier is 2. So my answer is going to be 2 to the x. Couple of things I want to label here. This number is my initial value. And this other number here is my multiplier. Because my graph is going up, I expected my multiplier to be more than 1. So it works. By coincidence, it's the same value on both. By coincidence, don't expect it all the time. Now, what are we going to do for graphs? How am I going to do exponents? Now, in your homework, you just have to fill in 2 spaces. I'm already going to type in y equals, and then you have to type in your initial value. And then you're going to see the times, and then you have to type in your multiplier, and then to the x. So on your homework, you're going to see 2 spaces that you have to fill in. One of them is your initial value, and one of them is your multiplier. Okay, let's take a look at question number 16. Let's see. Any points that I can see, the coordinates. I can see this point. I can find the coordinates of that point. Remember, I'm looking for points on the graph that I can find the coordinates of. I can find this one. I can find this one. This point, I'm trying to find as many points as possible. So my first point, I'm looking at this point. The coordinates of that point are negative 2, 1. My second point are negative 1, 2. Remember, second point, I'm talking about this point. Then I'm looking at my third point. The coordinates of that point is 0, 4. The coordinates of my other point are 1, 8. And then the coordinates of my other point are 2, 16. Think I have enough. So I start this by going y equals. First, I have to find my initial value. What's the value of y when x equals 0? So I'm looking at this point right here. What's the value of y when x is equal to 0? So my initial value is 4 times. Okay. Now, what's my multiplier? Looking at the x values, what do I do for 4 to become 8? Well, I multiply by 2. For 8 to become 16, I multiply by 2. My multiplier is 2. Going down, my multiplier is 2. Going up, I divide by 2. But my multiplier is, what do I do going down? My multiplier is 2. So in this case, I'm going to go 2 to the x. And again, in your homework, you just have to fill in your 4 and your 2. Everything else is already there. Okay, not bad, not bad. I expected my multipliers to be more than 1 for question 15 and 16. By coincidence, happens to be the same value, but they're more than 1. For 17 and 18, I expect my multiplier to be less than 1. So we're going to see what happens with that. Okay, interesting. Let's take a look at number 17. Let me zoom in. Any points that I can find. I can find the coordinates of this one. I can see another point. I can find the coordinates of that one. I'm looking for points that I can find the coordinates of. I can find the coordinates of this point, and that's it. That's all I get. So let's see. My first point. Okay. So my first point is negative 220. Good. My next point is negative 110. My other point is 0, 5. That's all I can get. I cannot find the coordinates of any other point. Okay, but I think I can go. One thing, again, make sure on your x values, you're increasing by 1. That has to happen. Always increase by 1, which is good. I'm good on that. So let's see. I'm ready to write my equation. Y is equal to my initial value. What's the value of y when x is equal to 0? My initial value is 5 times my multiplier. Okay. So starting here, it seems like going up, I multiply by 2, right? 10 to become 20, I multiply by 2. Going up. But I'm not interested in what happens going up. I'm interested in what's happening going down. So in that case, I have to divide by 2. The only thing is that on my equation, I already wrote times. So dividing by 2, isn't that the multiplication of the reciprocal? Wait a minute. Didn't I just say that earlier? Let me write that over here. Dividing by 2, isn't that the same thing as multiplying by 1/2? To help you out, let me write this as dividing by 2 over 1. Isn't that the same thing as multiplying by 1/2? Remember, dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So my multiplier in this case is 1/2. You guys are wondering, how am I going to type a 1/2 of my homework? How do I type a fraction? Well, 1/2, and then to the x. But remember, on your homework, you only had to give me, first of all, the multiplier, which we know, I mean the initial value, and then the multiplier. Everything else is typed for you already. So in this case, my initial value is 5. My multiplier is 1/2. Okay, good. Interesting. I expected it to be less than 1. So it's pretty cool. Let's take a look at question number 18. Let's create a table. Any point that um, I can see this point. I can also see this point, and I can also see this value right here. I cannot see anything else. So I'm going to create a table. My first point, coordinates of that point is -2/18. My next value is -1/6. And my third value is the 0.02. That said, I'll make sure you're increasing by 1 on the x value. So that's good. I'm good on that one. So I'm going to write my equation. Y equals. First, I had to think of my initial value. What's the value of y when x is 0? And I'm going to say 2. You guys see that here, right? What's the value of y when x equals 0? So 2. That's my initial value. Times my multiplier. Starting at an initial value, going up for 2 to become 6, I multiply by 3. For 6 to become 18, I multiply by 3. But my multiplier is not going up, it is going down. Oh, so what's the opposite of multiplying by 3? Let me see this right here. I'm going to write this at the bottom. Multiply by 3. So matter of fact, I'm going to write this as a fraction here. But remember, here's multiplying by 3, right? I don't have to multiply by 3. I have to divide by 3. Because going up is multiplication. Going down is division. Remember, my multiplier is going down. Okay. So dividing by 3. I even wrote it as a fraction. Dividing by 3/1. Isn't dividing by a fraction the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal? Dividing by 3/1 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/3. That is my multiplier, 1/3. So my multiplier is 1/3, all of this to the x. You don't quite have to type in the parentheses. I don't want us to get quite confused. If I was to type it on a calculator, yes, I will have to type in the parentheses. I didn't type parentheses on number 17. I don't want us to get confused. More than anything, I'm focused into, can you identify the initial value? Yes. In this case, it's 2. Can you identify the multiplier? Yes. In this case, it's 1/3. Remember, how are you going to type a fraction? 1/3. Remember that? It's 1/3. Awesome. There you go. That's what we did today.